Hello and welcome back to my Red Sea Reefer S-850 saltwater aquarium build series. Now since my last video, I've filled the tank with RODI water to rinse off any manufacturing goop and to check for leaks in the plumbing, and I've now installed my lighting and flow. So in today's video, I'm going to tell you why I've chosen what I've chosen for those two areas. The main lights will be 4 Red Sea Reef LED 160s, and along with the hanging kit, they were of course given to me for free by Red Sea, which of course was part of the reason I went for them. And while I would have chosen something else if they weren't free, I also would have said no if the lights were no good. So I'll start by telling you the main reasons I chose them, apart from the 100% discount of course. Now I personally take the view that the brand of light you choose won't be a significant factor behind the success of a reef tank, and I try to focus instead on getting whatever lights I choose set up right so they provide the best conditions for the corals and of course the best aesthetics for me. Now Red Sea recommends 3 of these lights for this 6-foot tank, and the spread is very wide, as you can see from the light spill that I'm getting on my living room wall. And because this will be an LPS tank, I'll be running very low power, so 3 units would have been more than enough to do the job. But I asked for 4 to increase my physical coverage and to reduce the intensity that I need to run each light at. Lights that spread par wide with wide angle lenses are great, but you just can't beat the physical coverage you get by adding more pucks. Now that will mean fewer spots in my tank that will get shaded, which means I'll be able to place coral on more parts of my rockwork, and it means I'll still get good light coverage when my corals grow into full-sized colonies and start to shade out their neighbours. As well as that, running more light at lower intensities means less heat, which should mean the fans are quieter and the power bricks won't heat up as much as they otherwise would. Now the primary benefit there is the fan noise. A tank of this size is always going to kick off a bit of ambient noise, but I'd like to reduce that as much as possible. And while I've never had heat problems with power bricks before, I always prefer to reduce excess heat in the dry section of my cabinet wherever possible. And running the lights and power bricks cooler will extend their usable life, although both of those last issues are very much a side benefit to the main benefit of quieter running. And the only other reason I wanted 4 of these is for the benefit of my camera. When it comes time to take photos and videos of the tank, I can simply whack the lights up briefly to 100%, which will mean the camera sensor won't have to work so hard, which in turn means I'll get a better quality image. And as well as that, there are times when I need to take a shot of a coral that is directly under my light, which means the camera blocks 90% of the available light. So having 4 pucks with widespread should mitigate against that admittedly niche problem. Now while I've chosen the Reef LEDs, my number 1 choice for a primary light is usually the Kessil A360X. It's what I have on both of my other aquariums, and I love the beautiful shimmer it gives that has no disco ball effect. And if Red Sea hadn't offered me these, Kessil is probably what I would have chosen. However, I bought a Red Sea Reef LED 90 a few years ago and the shimmer was excellent too, and I think you'd struggle to tell which is which just based on the shimmer if you put a Reef LED next to a Kessil. Kessils do have a wider colour spectrum, which is why I'd ordinarily choose those over the Reef LEDs, but the Kessil fans come on even at 1% intensity, so the Reef LEDs have an advantage there, at least when run at very low intensities, and ultimately while the Kessils might be better on paper, I don't expect to notice any difference in coral health or growth, whereas I definitely will appreciate the quieter operation. The one thing I don't like about both Kessils and Reef LEDs is that they don't give the deep blue fluorescence that I love to have in the evenings. Now don't get me wrong, they do still make your corals pop when the blue lights are on, and most people don't obsess about the minutiae of lights like I do, but as I always say, I want the full-on Chernobyl fallout effect on my tank, and that goes double for an LPS tank. So to get around that, I've also bought 2 6-foot AI blade grows. I've mounted them using 2 lengths of aluminium profile resting on the Red Sea Pendant, but I don't currently have all the fixings, so this is not how it will look when it's finished, and I've put them up today just to give you a rough idea for the purposes of this video. I have the same setup on my other 2 tanks, and they really do make my corals look fantastic in the evenings, especially with the added shimmer from the Kessils. They will of course also give even more coverage and spread, which will mean fewer shaded spots, and again will make lighting easier for my camera work. I've gone for the grows instead of the glows because the part of the spectrum I'm interested in here is the 450nm part, and both the grow and glows have the same number of 450nm LEDs, so the only difference between the two is that the grow also has white LEDs, whereas the glow has more purple and violet colour LEDs with no white LEDs. And given the choice, I always prefer to have more white LEDs than purple. Now the last thing I should tell you about on the lights is the Red Sea Pendant. This is the 6-foot version, and I absolutely love it. Mounting it to the ceiling was easier than it looks, and it just took a bit of patience. I used 4 of these plasterboard rule plugs to hold each of the hanging cables in place. They go into the ceiling really easily, although I'd highly recommend this special rule plug anchor tool that is designed specifically for these fixings. You can do this with just a screwdriver, but this thing made the job really easy and was well worth the extra £15. Now the hardest part of hanging the pendant was measuring the right spot, and I had to break my own personal rule of measure once, drill twice. But all it really took was a tape measure and a bit of patience. Now the pendant looks super clean with the red sea lights, and it will be a bit of a shame to take away from the slick look by adding the AI blades, but my corals will look better for it, so I can live with that. The pendant has exit holes for the power cables that you can switch to whichever corner you need to. Now ideally I would have had all cables exiting at one corner instead of 2, but 4 of the Reef LED power bricks would have taken up too much space in the dry section of my cabinet, so I have 2 power bricks in the tank cabinet and the other 2 in a separate cabinet next to the tank on the other side. As to flow then, and I'm using 4 Ecotech MP40s. I had these on my last tank, so it made sense to carry them over, but it wasn't an absolute no-brainer. The main things I like about the MP40s are the power and flow patterns, the easy cleaning of the wet sides, the fact that they don't have cables in the tank, and of course the built-in battery backup option. Although on that point I'll be using this lithium-ion battery backup instead of the Ecotech one because it's just as good yet much cheaper and a fraction of the size and weight, and I'll link my video review of that at the top of the screen. The downsides of the MP40s are that you can't point them in different directions, which limits where you can direct the flow, and they also get pretty noisy if you crank them up too high. And because of that I did consider a few other options, including the AI Nero 7s, the Reef Factory Smart Waves, and various Jekyll options. But ultimately the lack of a plug and play battery backup option was the deal breaker on all of those for me, and I wish some of the other manufacturers would just add in a simple plug and play battery backup option. Now I haven't dialed the lights or flow in yet, and I'll need to wait until I've added the rocks and corals before I do so, but the MP40s will probably be set at around 60% maximum, and I'm hoping I'll be able to set the lights at a low enough intensity to keep the cooling fans turned off. Now I said at the start of the video that I filled the tank with RODI water to check for leaks in the plumbing. All joints were fine except for the return pump connection, which was dribbling a little bit at the top. So I've 3D printed a small stand to allow me to push the connection tube to the top of the barb fitting, and I'll also add some silicone and cable ties for good measure. And the reason I used RODI water and not tap water for this job is mainly because I have a long tube that connects straight from my RODI filter that I could just sit in the tank and let it do its thing, whereas if I'd used tap water I'd have had to lug barrels back and forth from my kitchen several times. Now my next step is to add all the filtration and other equipment to the sump, and once I've done that I'll be able to start the cycle and add my rock and corals. So make sure you like and subscribe if you want to keep following the journey, and if you've got any questions let me know in the comment section below, and until next time, happy reefing.